Hello, everyone. As Kunal mentioned, I'll take one take on big data or my perspective on what that enables really. So I've been doing machine learning for the last few years, so my take is clearly towards that. And I've really seen big data enable something new, right? Machine learning has been around for a long time, but with big data really getting bigger and compute to go with it, it's really changed what we've been able to do in the last few years. We've seen AI has been talked about in machine learning and deep learning for a very long time. In the last few years, we've seen it actually come to fruition and come to reality, where in very, very specific areas, of course, we're seeing these machines now starting to do as well as humans or even better in some specific cases and so on. And I attribute a lot of that to big data. Of course, it's still people behind the scenes making these new algorithms, improving them, and all the compute that folks like Intel and NVIDIA and others are building and so on. So some of the interesting things that we've seen, if I see the progress, one of the things that big data there has changed, there's this data set called ImageNet, which is basically 1 million images all labeled by humans across 1,000 different categories. And back in 2010 or 2011, where things was on this data set, it was very early days, these machines would maybe make 40% mistakes or something, so maybe 60% or so. Move that a few years forward with the compute, and in this case, a large enough data set, I guess. And these same machines on that data set are basically at 3% error rate. So they're basically better than humans. Humans on that particular data set are typically around 95% accuracy. So things, data has really started to move how things are, so machines really can see now based on that. Similarly, another domain, speech, where over time with all the data that you get, all the things that you're doing in terms of just, let's say, doing voice search and so on, and putting that together with computing algorithms, we've seen machines become amazingly better at understanding what you're saying. So if you look at, just a few years ago, phones were there, but you really had to type all the time. You still do often. But if I take out my phone today and talk to it and do a voice search, it most often recognizes what I'm saying. In fact, it recognizes my kids as well, and all kinds of accents, all kinds of languages. So an amazing use of putting that big data together and really leveraging that to do some new things and making machines a lot better. Another important area, of course, speech and vision are great, but text or natural language, something that we communicate with a lot, that's improved a lot as well. We've gone from, again, as Google, I guess, we try to understand the world's information. We try to organize it, so we definitely want to understand the web. Again, just, one is just do the dumb searching or whatever, but, to understand that and do better, something my other colleague here, I guess, has also worked on before. These algorithms are starting to get better and better, where they make a huge difference and make these searches a lot better. They truly are beginning to understand everything we're doing around the searches, right? Not just the basics. So what does that mean for us, right? What does that change in big data mean? If you look at products around us, so this is just the basics, but with products like Google Search itself, that's improving a lot because of the data that we have, because of the algorithms and the compute that goes with it. So lots of improvements there. On the other senses like vision and speech, vision, there are products like Google Photos for the consumers, where just a few years ago you would have to, you could store images, but they were just files. Now we can actually understand what's in those files thanks to, again, understanding this data better. And you don't have to necessarily, label things yourself. Google does that for you, or many such things do that for you. On the vision side, there have also been, other improvements, like not just this is for the consumers, but I was talking to folks here about on the medical side, there are radiologists who look at these images all day long and try to identify, say, cancer or other things. And now we can automate more of that, again, thanks to all the work that these doctors have done before, who they have labeled and gone through painstakingly understanding these images. Now we can train these machines to learn from them and really do the same thing, or even better in some cases. If you think about what this big data enables in this case is, it's really enabling these machines to learn from a lot more than humans can typically do. Like a doctor often in their entire lifetime would go through maybe a few tens of thousands of images, and these machines can go through a lot more in just a day. So it's very hard to have an apples-to-apples comparison. That's where these machines shine and learn from this big data. Similarly, there are lots of examples across the board, and I can go on and on. Does that mean big data is everything? If you collect data, lots of data through these algorithms, to some extent, yes. I'm a big believer in that. I think it's really helping us in many, many ways. And there are lots of areas where we can collect more data, and if we can get, again, we need humans there to label these, in what we call supervised learning, often where you tell that here's the data, here's the target. As long as you can do that, you can actually train these models to do really, really well. That said, that doesn't really solve all the problems. Like the example Kunal was talking about of subprime mortgages, where the models never really saw a world where prices went down. Of course, many humans didn't see that either, which is interesting. But we see the same things in these models as well. So to give you an example of things that don't quite work, in terms of some AI success disasters or these goof-ups that we've seen over the last few years, Microsoft launched this conversational bot a couple of years ago called Tay, and very quickly it learned from people to really use bad words, be racist, and so on. So it really learns the data that you give. Same thing, it's not like Google's perfect. We had a launch for Google Photos, the same thing that worked really, really well. In certain cases, because of the data, it would not recognize African Americans, or it would recognize them as something else, which was clearly something wasn't great. So it really depends on the data that you're learning from, and so that it's really important for us to, in that sense, be thoughtful about the data when we build these, let's say, just the data sets and so on. Another area that I see being really problematic for us is all data sets have biases built into them because they're learning from the world. I mean, you could say that's true for biases that we have as well. We learn from the same kind of world, and we have those biases. But it becomes especially important when you are training these machines, because they are going to magnify those biases in many different ways. One example that you see is if you ask, again, looking at these data, and this one's something that kids do as well, and a lot of humans do as well, is give them pictures of, say, just gender bias, right? You have pictures of men and women in medical suits. The guy would be a doctor and the female would be a nurse. That's just something that's inherent in the data just because of what we see. And if we are not thoughtful about providing the right data, we will basically be really pushing these machines and the models and everything that we are doing with all the data that we have in the wrong direction. One way I like to think of it is, even though these machines and the models are going to learn from all the data that we create, we as humans still have the responsibility to guide them just like we would guide our kids in terms of being thoughtful about what to point them towards. And that's how I see a mix of really that thoughtfulness coming into the basic big data landscape. Thank you.